All right, well, this is going to be fun having hopefully what won't be a too delayed stream.
Yeah, I mean, my Wi-Fi's not too bad, so...
Yeah, it's more just like how quickly it can upload onto YouTube. Yeah, we'll just see how it goes.
I haven't pulled out the bits yet.
So it's about a 5-second delay,
Okay.
which is terrible.
I keep finding cops difficult in this car. Like, I just don't know when to turn in.
So
I'm just
like,
used to driving F1 cars around here, I think, and like I just turn in and it sticks, where obviously this doesn't. So I normally use the 50 marker board as like a turning point, but I don't feel like it's like I just miss the apex like every time. Maybe I don't know if it's going too fast or...
It's one of those corners where basically when you hit the brakes you just have to turn in for the corner and try and get as close as you can to the apex.
Yeah.
So I know that the general premise is brake, steer, then accelerate.
It's brake and steer at the same time.
Yeah, for cops you kind of have to pitch the car in as you start braking to at least get it started.
Also, I don't think I've got a setup on here either yet. I think that's not been done yet for whatever we're using.
That's fine. I mean, it's not the end of the world. A setup will help you go faster, but it won't teach you how to drive the car right, if that makes sense. And you'll always get more time driving the car correctly.
Okay.
So with cops, you basically if you treat it as an early apex corner, so you have to dive very early in.
Yeah.
So you basically as you get up towards the 50 meters, you probably need to brake and turn a little bit earlier.
So just before the 50.
And you're basically aiming to get close to the wall. That's like the grey wall that's on the
left-hand
side. Right side.
On the right-hand side, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so I've just seen you go through cops again. Basically, that just the earlier you can get it turned in, the better.
Okay.
But the speed you carry through, that'll come through with the line you're taking. It is a fourth gear corner in GT3s, so you don't need to drop down to third.
Was I in third?
Really screw it up. No, you were in fourth.
I was in fourth. Okay,
right.
cool.
Yeah, you had done it right. The earlier you get the car turned in, the nicer of a run it's going to be.
Yeah. Is that the same as sort of like turn 1 as well? It's like quite similar, because that again it's flat out in an F1 car, but
yeah, in this you don't really. I mean, yeah, the more you get over to the apex, the better. I don't know whether it's a downshift in iRacing. In ACC, it depends on the car. You can take a lot of apex curb, but if you go through turn 1 too fast, it compromises turn 2.
okay.
You want to ideally take turn 1 as fast as you can while still doing turn 2 flat.
Yeah.
But sometimes if you do have it too fast, you can't do turn 2 flat because you'll be too tight on the left side.
Yeah. I fucked that up.
Yeah, that was a bit of ambition ahead of adhesion.
I find off tracks as well like really strict, but maybe it's just me. Like being used to like F1 and being able to go over all the curbs and
Generally for iRacing, generally for iRacing, the track limits are done by using the middle of the car and the white line. There are different.
It's not three tires over like in F1.
No.
I see.
No, it's unless it says otherwise in if you click on the rules panel that you can see down along the bottom. So on there it will tell you what you can and can't use in terms of track limits. So yeah, in general, it's half of the car has to be inside
that
track
black and white
limits
line.
to not be an invalidation. But obviously, like different tracks have different corners which have different rules on them, and goodness knows what else.
Yeah. And do you do the loop in first or second?
Normally I do it in seconds just so you don't
lose too much speed.
Well, it's more whacking traction control on the exit.
Yeah.
It's just one less thing to worry about.
And that's the same in Luffield as well.
Generally, yeah. I try to avoid using first gear wherever possible. Like, obviously, there are going to be some corners where you need to.
Yeah.
Because it is just so slow. Yeah, that was pretty good.
Okay.
Cops. That was very good.
that was track limits. Yeah.
Yeah, in ACC you can get away with going all over the Astro in Maggots and Beckets, but not in iRacing.
Which is harsh because actually you need to like use. Well, I think you need to use some of it to make it easier, but.
Well, that's why they don't let you do it, to make it more of a challenge.
And then I can't remember what this bit's called, but is that again all in second there?
So for Vale and Club, so I don't know whether it's actually called Vale and Club or whether it's all just a club complex, but normally I use so. The way I see it is that Vale is the 90-degree right, and then Club is the double right afterwards. For Vale, I normally use first gear just for the engine braking.
Okay, so you've caught the first left-hander, and then
so
switch
for
to
the
second for
left-hander,
the right-hander.
Yeah, I short shift into second to get more traction. So, as you probably saw in the SimStar race, I've been using the Lamborghini quite a lot recently, at least in ACC. And that car is naturally aspirated, so it doesn't have any turbochargers. So the power delivery is basically instant. Like, the response time of the engine is a lot. Don't get me wrong, the turbocharged racing engine has very good response time, but nothing's going to beat not having turbo at all.
Yeah.
Which means that it's very easy to spin the rear wheels up, and it's something that's quite well known in that the Audi and Lamborghini, which are the two main naturally aspirated cars, go through their rear tyres like it's going out of fashion.
Oh really?
Yeah, and it's because of that power delivery. So
does it make them better for cornering?
If you like having if you drive it a bit wrong, the rear can want to come round on you, which could be really helpful if you know how to manage it. Because you can use that extra rotation to get through sharp corners when under heavy braking.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it just comes down to which car you like the driving style of the moment. That was a very early turn in.
Yeah, it was.
But yeah, if you can carry that much speed through turn 1 and keep turn 2 flat, that's pretty good. I don't know whether it's the case in iRacing, but in ACC, the Ferrari has horrendous. Well, I don't want to say it's turbo lag, but it's like when the turbos fire up, it throws so much torque at the rear wheels.
It's exactly the same. Yeah, like you always feel like you're going to lose it even on like a really small corner.
Yeah, and when I tried driving it, like I drove it for a month or so, but I just could not get used to how much torque it would have.
In fact, the ACC, I think the Ferrari feels way better in ACC than it does iRacing.
Okay. I've not done enough. I've not done enough iRacing to
compare.
To know how. Well, the only. So I don't really like just in general. I'm not a massive fan of the GT3s in iRacing anyway.
No, I absolutely hate it, but it's because James and Mike and everyone they love it. So like we tend to do like a lot of GT3 endurance races, but personally I'd be quite happy if I never do them.
Yeah, like for me, I was umming about whether I actually wanted to get an iRacing GT3 to get up to A license, so I could go and do IMSA.
Yeah.
Because that's what I really wanted to do. And then they moved the proto like about. I think I got a GT3 a couple of weeks to go left in a season, and then the following season they added Proto GT into Class B. Like, they moved it from Class C to B, and I thought, excellent, don't have to drive a GT3 now.
Yeah, to be fair, like one that we have done, which we all really liked, was the LMP2 car.
What, the Delara?
Yeah.
The P2 and P3s are very, very good cars. They're also quite, like, they're a good stepping stone up along the sports car ladder if you want to end up driving something like the GTP.
Yeah. I think we're going to try getting to do the hyperclass car class in Le Mans next year for the Le Mans.
Yeah.
But we were all too used to driving GT3 cars, so that's why we all sort of went for that one.
Yeah.
I think I'm carrying too much speed in.
Yeah, that was
I think I just need to brake slightly harder.
Yeah. I think in general, I need to try and remind myself as to how I drive at Silverstone in ACC, but I think I'm kind of like trail braking all the way until I get to the apex. And then basically once I'm on top of the apex, then I can stop. Then you start feeding in the throttle.
Okay. I think the other issue is I just don't know how to trail brake. So
okay, well that's...
You'd put your foot on the brake here and ease off as I come into here?
So when you want to stop or whatever else, we can go through kind of like how trail braking works or whatever else.
Yeah.
All right, so if you go back to somewhere where you can see your inputs, like your steering, throttle and brake, just keep in mind your camera might be in the way of it. So I think it's in options, up at the top right. Oh no, I can see them just. So the reason why people trail brake is a tyre can only provide a certain amount of grip, whether it be what's known as longitudinal, which is forwards or backwards, and lateral, being left and right. And tyres are normally characterised with their grip levels with a circle. And it's something known as a friction circle. Let me just find an example of it. Yeah, that'll do. Right, I'm just going to share my screen with you so you can see what I'm looking at if I do.
Stop sharing mine because you're on my stream now. Yep, got it.
That's fine. Right. So this is a very simplistic version of trying to explain what a friction circle is. So when you're under very heavy braking, I'm assuming you can see my cursor.
Yeah, I can. Yeah.
So when you're under heavy braking, if you try turning left or right, you end up going outside of this red circle. And if you do go beyond the edge of the circle, the tyre loses grip.
Okay.
Is that's the short way of explaining it.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're coming up towards the corner, yes, you want to have very heavy braking as you're getting towards it so you can slow down. But as you slowly start coming out of the brake, you've then suddenly got space to move left and right. So as you slowly reduce your brake pressure, you can increase
your rotation,
your turning.
Yeah.
So if I just stop sharing, I'm going to load up a replay from ACC and try and find an example of
it's weird because it's like I think I know the rough concept of like what I need to do with my feet to trail brake, I think, but I just
actually
don't do it ever.
Okay.
And like I just for some reason can't like make
Surely I
that
have an
switch.
example of it somewhere in. So I did a race last night at Zolder in ACC. So I'm just seeing if there's an example. Yeah, I'm not exactly a great example of excellent trail braking because I come out of the brake very quickly, which is something I need to work on myself. Ooh,
What do you mean
yeah,
you
that'll
release
do.
the brake too quick?
Yeah,
Okay.
and that's not a good thing because it can throw the weight of the car all over the place.
Okay.
Right, so I've just loaded up a one of the corners. Just turn that down so I can actually talk. So I've hit the brakes here, and yes, there's a small amount of steering, but the tyres in ACC and the ABS system kind of baby
So
you a
I
little
can't
bit.
see anything. I can just see a white screen.
Oh, okay. Let me try loading that again. Have you got anything on your screen?
Nope.
And say I can see something on like it's coming through.
No, you've
On.
just got a white. Just click on.
All right, let me try reconnecting.
Got you.
Oh, you got it now?
Yeah.
Okay, so with ACC's in-car electronics, so the traction control and ABS are much more, I don't want to say realistic, but they're a lot more sensible than iRacing. For iRacing, you don't really want to use either of them if you can avoid it.
Okay. I think I've got mine, the traction control, currently on 6.
Yeah, I
ABS
mean
on 4.
that'll come through whatever setup you're going to use.
Yeah.
So that's not something really to worry about right now, and like we're talking like pretty high level on how to extract the maximum out of the car. But anyway, so I've got a small amount of steering. Like this is just after the like just as I get to full brakes, I'm already starting to put a bit of steering in. This is the kind of thing that you want to do at somewhere like Cops. Like you basically brake and start steering at the same time. And you just kind of have to balance it. Like it'll take a few laps to work out what the right balance between braking and steering is in each circumstance, but it's something that you learn as you do more and more laps. So if I turn down the playback speed on this, so I've used the car to kind of rotate a little bit quite early, so I'm in a fairly straight angle. And then as I start to bleed out of the brake, as I get closer to the apex, I can start putting in more steering.
Okay. So is that, it gives you a smoother curve, I take it?
So if you didn't trail brake at all, which the previous lap was a reasonably good example, because I came out of the brakes very quickly. At least a lot quicker. Like I'm already out of the brakes well in advance of the apex. The deeper into a corner you can trail brake towards the apex in general, the faster you go through the corner, as long as you can keep your minimum speed up.
So when you say trail braking towards the apex, so as I turn in towards the corner, so you brake obviously, like say in a straight line, like, and then as you say turn into the corner, so let's use Cops, so I'd brake for a couple of probably like a second, then I'd turn in, and as I turn in I trail off the brake.
Yeah, so your steering angle and brake pressure effectively work opposite to each other.
Okay.
So
what point do you start trailing off the brake? So as soon as you start turning in?
Normally, yes. When you start turning in, that's when you start to trail out. It depends car by car.
Okay.
Like something, I've got to make sure I get this the right way around. Something like a front engine car would be more lenient towards where you start trail braking because you've got a lot of weight over the front axle anyway.
Yeah, whereas a rear-ended car wouldn't be.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's not exactly more difficult, but
More
it's going to
forgiving.
take a little bit more time to get used to.
Yeah.
Like you kind of have to get it right, otherwise it doesn't work as well as it can.
And what's the
Like you,
Ferrari?
so the Ferrari is mid-engined. Um, it's
It's a
so
good balance.
yeah, so like each of the cars kind of work. Like depending on where you have your engine, it depend like the characteristics of the car will just drastically change. So a front engine car will tend to have a good amount of front end grip, but the rear can be a bit all over the place.
Yeah.
Whereas a mid engine car, your weight balance is a lot more neutral,
Okay.
and it has it can have pretty good traction coming out of slow corners compared to a front engine car because you've got the weight over the back. Even more so in the Porsche because the engine is on top of the rear axle, which is why, in general, if it starts raining, the Porsches will go to the top.
Yeah, a lot of people say that the Porsche is like, especially like the Porsche Cup, like when you trail brake it, it's so much quicker to drive.
Yeah, yeah, and that's just because of how the weight balance of the car works. But anyway, so with trail braking, you kind of use it in inverse to how much steering you have. So as you come out of the brake pedal, the more steering you put in.
Yeah.
It's something that will take quite a while to get used to.
Okay.
But the car generally will be a lot more stable when you get it right. Because like if you use the brake pedal like a light switch, you'll have a huge amount of momentum going forwards, and then once you come out of the brake, all of the weight in the car will shift backwards. But
Okay.
so that could like especially when you're coming into a corner, when you're approaching an apex, if you suddenly get out of the brake pedal, that the front axle is going to go very light,
Okay.
and you'll just end up understeering off. It's quite common that people will use the brake pedal not necessarily to slow themselves down more for the corner, but to get the front axle to bite more.
Okay.
Just because of using the effective mechanics of how an object behaves when it moves. And the same somewhat goes for the accelerator. Sometimes the throttle can actually save you from a slide because it puts a lot more weight on the rear tires.
Okay.
So do you
So
do you
when you're coming in, like I think the problem is what I always struggle with is pushing my brake to 100%. So I probably need to recalibrate it. But like, I think it's because my brake also doesn't move. So it's gonna be like all down to like pressure, isn't it? Like I feel like I don't really need to move my foot a lot, if that makes sense.
So
and I think it's just like accelerator, obviously there's a lot more movement and I feel like you can do it a lot more like gradually, whereas the brake just feels like, yeah, it's like just because it's a lot harder.
yeah, so
I think also muscle memory, I've never done it, so I'm just used to sort of like braking, turn, and then accelerating.
Yeah, so with the brake pedal, what you said about having it at 100%, being able to get it to 100%, that's not that much of a problem in iRacing.
Okay.
You don't really ever want to be at maximum brake pressure in iRacing, even in a car with ABS, because if you start triggering the ABS system, that's going to take brake pressure away from you anyway.
Okay.
I don't know how aware you are of how ABS works, but if the car recognizes that it's going to lock a wheel because of how much brake pressure there is,
Yeah.
what it will do is rapidly increase and decrease the amount of brake pressure going to that wheel, like inside the brake line.
Yeah.
So instead of it being like a full lock or anything that you'd experience in something like a Formula car without ABS, it's almost like a chatter that you'll hear from the tire, in that it constantly locks, unlocks, locks, unlocks, locks, and unlocks
Yeah.
at such a high speed to stop the tire from effectively
So
flat
it's
spotting itself.
best to not drive with ABS.
You can, I'd keep ABS on
Yeah.
in a GT3 in iRacing, but I wouldn't rely on it to
Okay.
solve all of your problems. You
Yeah.
can rely on it in ACC to solve your problems, but you can't in iRacing.
Yeah. Okay.
So if you think, I'm going to get rid of this because I don't need that anymore. If you think you need to get more into the habit of trail braking and such, what you can do with something like the options screen in iRacing, when you put your foot down on the brake, obviously the red bar in the middle will go up. What you can do is watch that bar and slowly try to decrease the level of it in a smooth manner. Now, it won't be perfect for when you're actually driving the car, because different corners will warrant different amounts of trail braking depending on their speed and such. But it
Yeah.
will
So I
get
suppose
you.
cups will be quite quick, whereas like
Yeah, so
a long
for a corner
will be
like
slower.
Cops, for a corner like Cops, you're not going to need that much brake pressure to start with. Like, you'll still need to put in a reasonable amount, but it's not going to be
you're
as
gonna
much
about
as like what you
40%.
need for the loop or somewhere like that.
Yeah. Okay, so even if you're at like 40%, you're still getting into the habit of trailing.
Exactly.
Okay.
The idea is that you kind of stab onto the brake pedal, but you come off it gently.
Okay.
And
Alright.
just how quickly you go onto the brake depends on the stability of the car. If it's quite unstable when going onto the brakes, you need to slow down your motion of getting onto it, so it doesn't jerk the car around as much.
Okay. Alright.
So yeah, that's quite a nice little trick that you can do in your spare time, or like just before you get into go and do a practice session or whatever else. You just go in, have some kind of visualization for your pedals, push down on the brake pedal, and then slowly come up and watch that bar drop in a gradual manner, and that will slowly build up the muscle memory in your foot.
Okay.
Now, it is, as I said, it is going to be different when you're actually driving out on track, and doing it effectively on paper, sitting in an options menu, and in practice on a track is completely different.
No, but I suppose I get to know the movement of kind of what I need to replicate, whereas at the minute
Exactly,
I'm
yeah.
not doing it at all. So yeah,
Yeah,
well, I don't
so-
think I'm trail braking at all. I mean, when I looked at like Track Titan or whatever, and I compare it to other people, it's normally like when I go on the throttle and how I go on the brakes seems to be the difference.
I don't know whether you've got Track Titan open at the moment, but it's somewhat irrelevant. I'll just have a quick look at. Oh dear, Track Titan needs to sort something out with Silverstone,
Right.
because it uses the new pit lane. It's saying that you're losing 4.5 seconds through Veiled by itself.
Yeah, that's not the case.
Like Vale and Club, and that's because the fast the
Pit lane.
reference lap that it's comparing it to is an in lap,
Right.
where someone's just going straight down the pit lane and then hitting the brakes for the pit limiters. So that's kind of not helpful. Let's look at Stowe as an example. Okay, yeah. So you're just what I'm looking. If I pull this out, and
So I got it open here as well. So Stowe is. This is
I've
testing
got it on my screen now. It's just so I can kind of like model exactly where it is. that you're looking at. So you're coming onto the brakes, fine. Yeah, all right. I know that it says that you shouldn't be using
Which corner
maximum
is this, sorry?
stow. It's like the third to last corner. It's the corner just before pit lane entry.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So
The one that is saying I'm losing 4 seconds on.
hang on. If you just look at my screen, I can explain it.
Oh yeah, cool.
So if I change it to actually share the screen so you can see my mouse, this is the one we're looking at over here.
Yeah.
So click on that, and there we are. There's Stowe corner. Very nice. I may have just screwed this up. Oh no, that's fine. So if we hide that, and that, because we don't really need it, and that as well. So braking, yeah, right, you're braking a little bit on the early side, but that's fine just to get used to it.
Braking more than the other person as well.
Yeah, so this is what I was on about with when you reach 100% brake pressure and how the ABS interacts with the car. But what you could probably see with the orange line is that you come off the brake in a gradual manner, and for ACC this would be great. Like, this is a good transition down from high brake pressure down to low brake pressure. But for iRacing, because of how the ABS system works, you don't need to go all the way up to 100%, because the ABS system will just knock it back anyway. And normally ABS will cut more than the gap you're seeing here. Because it would be the front right that would be triggering the ABS system first, as it would be the unloaded tire. Yeah. The one on the inside. So you'd suddenly lose a lot of braking performance from the front right tire.
Okay, which is the one you want.
Yeah, you don't want to rely too much on the outside tire, otherwise you'll overload it and you'll just understeer off the road. So what you said about not being able to reach 100% brake pressure, turns out you can, but that might not be the best thing to do in iRacing. ACC, perfectly fine, but in iRacing, not the greatest. And that's why they have a much slower drop in their brake pressure.
So is that down to like how they're actually using the brake with their foot, or is it down to like because they didn't apply as much pressure with the ABS kicking in?
It's kind of a bit of both. So they didn't go as peaky with the brake pressure because of the ABS system, but the counteract of it is that they need to be on the brake
for longer.
But this idea, so I don't think you could hide. No, you can't. Okay, fine. So with the blue line on the braking trace, it slowly goes down, and then once you get right up towards, like, just after you've turned in for the apex, it starts dropping away pretty quickly. This little bump in here will just to get the nose in towards the apex more than anything. If they were a little bit tighter, I would expect it to be basically something that connects the dots between here and here. And it wouldn't be this bump, it would be more of a straight line.
Okay.
But that allows them to slowly increase the amount of steering angle that they put in. Now, your steering angle is fine until you get to about here, where suddenly you pile on more steering and more braking to get the car a little bit tighter.
Yeah.
I think what that might be is you're not quite, if I zoom in on this, I think you might be a little bit, like, the only reason I can think of as to why you would do this is you're worried about track limits on the exit. It's the only real reason that I can think of. But that's something that you just learn by doing. Like, you understand how far you can really push the track limits.
Yeah, there's a couple of
by
corners
going over them.
that I find that I run out wide if I carry in too much speed. That's turn 1, Cops Corner and Stowe.
Okay, that also explains why you might have hit the brakes before, because there was a stab of throttle in the middle of the corner. So, in general, you don't want to use the throttle at any point in a corner until you know that you can exit the corner without coming out of it.
Okay.
So these little jumps aren't very good for how the car behaves in the corner or your speed through it. It seems counterintuitive because you would think, well, more throttle equals faster, which is true, but not in the middle of a corner.
Okay.
So I noticed that at if I go round to what section is it? 2, 3, 4. So okay, so in the middle of, is that in the middle? No, it's not in the middle. So I noticed in the middle of Luffield that you were taking a few stabs at, like a few small stabs at the throttle.
Yeah.
In the middle of the corner. That's like, if you're taking stabs in the middle of the corner because you've gone too slowly, like because you've entered it slowly, that just means you can go faster entering the corner. Like, you can brake later than you actually think. I need to try and remind myself as to which one of these all are. So if we get we could get rid of that. Actually, we'll keep the steering, get rid of the gear, get rid of that. So where are we? So this is the exit of Brooklands.
Yeah.
Like this little section. And then
so I haven't reached as much speed as the other person.
Yeah, so a bit slow on the throttle. Probably because you've taken a wide line entering, getting a wide line exiting, which is great for the for a general corner, but you need to still consider how you're going to handle, like, because they're so close to each other, you have to treat it as a complex of corners. So you kind of have to use one to set up the other, wherever you can. So for Brooklands, and this is the same for ACC, you go for a very early first, like, you basically dive as close as you can towards the apex before you get there.
Yeah, so that left-hand side apex.
Yeah, if you load up your iRacing stream again, unless I've still got it open somewhere and I'm just missing it.
Still have it open.
Yeah, you do. Okay. So if you use the replay, like the rewind function in the replay to scan backwards towards Brooklands, then we can have a look at it with a practical example. If you close out of options, it should come up down at the bottom. Yeah.
Yeah.
Use the.
Yeah, the stream's behind, I think.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm just trying to work out what's going on. So if you go to the chase camera angle, not the far chase one, that's probably a bit too far back.
I mean, the chase is really quite close.
Oh, okay, well.
I mean, I can probably move the chase out. I'll show you in a sec.
Yeah, when it loads up. Although the chopper angle might be. Yeah, okay, just let's have a look. Oh wow, yeah, that is close.
So that's the chase. That's far chase.
Yeah, chase would probably be better because far chase is.
Far
chase is quite high up. No, that'll be fine.
Yeah.
It's all right where it is.
I can move it out slightly from the car?
It's fine where it is.
Okay, cool. So I completely missed the apex. Yeah.
I'm just waiting for it to appear on the stream. Crank the playback speed up. So, yeah, the general premise for Brooklands is you kind of want to hug the inside curb all the way round from the moment it starts.
Yep.
So you basically dive for it very early, and just hug it as tight as you can all the way through. The way that you drove it on the replay is fine if it was by itself, as if it was its
Single
own corner and it had a straight on the exit where you prioritize the exit.
Yeah.
And that's a good way to be driving, but it's quite counterintuitive when you've got a corner that goes in the opposite direction very quickly after it.
Yeah.
But that's just how to drive around each of the corners as quickly as you can, and that's something that the Track Titan system does quite well in showing you your line against the line of somebody who's faster. And arguably, I'd say that's more important than all of the other information. Like, knowing what lines to take can give you so much more information than basically anything else, because that teaches you how to drive the car properly.
Yeah.
And driving a car properly will always get you more time than any setup could ever do.
Okay.
The setup can make life easier for you, and it can make getting that right line a bit easier. But as much as I hate repeating,
so it's always good to practice maybe without setups. Perfect the car and the driving for the car, and then put your setup on it at the end.
Yeah, and then kind of just get used to it.
Tweak
like
it.
You've effectively learnt the good habits before you get the good technical stuff, really.
Yeah.
As much as I hate repeating quotes from specific individuals, there is one quote that makes a hell of a lot of sense. 90% of your time will come from driving the car correctly. The remaining 10% is the setup.
Is that it? Wow. Okay.
Yeah. It's
Can
it's
a
not
setup
necessarily
make you
like
drive the car correctly though? Because could you say like you'd find it a lot easier to drive on a certain setup, so therefore you are driving it better and more correctly, or is that
you could,
just
but
rubbish?
that might be the case, but it's also very good at masking a bad habit. So it's
Okay.
kind of a double-edged sword. Yes, it can make things easier to get used to, but conversely, if you're doing something wrong and you're consistently doing it wrong despite having a good setup, then you haven't really learned anything. You've just had something that makes you go slightly faster, even though you haven't actually improved as a driver.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think that's like quite where I'm going wrong. I suppose I can only really say F124 because that's the game I spend a lot of my time on. Is just because that's what I enjoy. If I don't do it with the setup, I'll probably be 3 or 4 seconds slower than with a setup. But then I suppose, like you said, I'm not really driving the car how I should be.
Yeah, you might not be. I mean, it's not something I've looked into on how you do with from the F1 side. But like I've just moved over to have a look at cops. And the short answer is like you're breaking probably a little bit. I know that this isn't updated for the most recent session that you've done. It was one a bit earlier on today. But it's being on the brake for too long.
Okay.
Basically, like you're holding it's a good pattern for trail braking, but you go a lot slower. Like you're way slower at your minimum speed point, like you're 20 kilometers an hour slower,
Okay, that's quite a lot.
which is a lot, to be blunt with it.
It'd be like what
Um,
in lap time, half second to a second.
well, this is saying that you're losing 4 tenths
Okay.
um, through that corner alone by being that far down. And with the top chart, it shows you where you're losing that time. And sure, you recover relatively on the exit, like the increase, like the gradient of that line isn't as steep, but it's all in the entry.
Yeah.
It's all in this entry phase.
Yeah, I
Basically,
feel
from
like
the moment you hit the
sometimes
brakes to the apex
I
is
feel
where
like
it
I
goes
can
wrong.
carry in more speed, but then sometimes I feel like if I carry more speed in, that I'm going to run wide or, not going to have like the right angle on the corner. So I think it's like just
Yeah,
trying
and
to
that's
like practice getting the.
yeah, that's more getting the right line and then building up the speed as you go on, rather than trying to fire in as fast as you can and then just overloading the tires. So if I close, I don't need that
So
one
when you're
out.
like practicing and obviously trying to get this muscle memory and perfect each corner, would you do a lap and say focus on maybe 3 or 4 corners and keep focusing on those 3 and 4 corners until you get them right, and then maybe focus on another 3 or 4 and then sort of try and sort of then link them all together, or do you just do the whole track as a whole every time?
Um, Normally when I'm driving, I'll find that there are some corners that I feel particularly weak in. Um, at which point I'll go and have a look at some data or like a hot lap video or something like that to try and work out where it is that I'm going wrong. So something like this, like if I saw this as with my data being the orange line, I'd be thinking, right, okay, I'm braking far too much. Well, I'm braking a bit late, slow on the brakes, but I'm braking a lot further into the corner than I need to. So I'd be thinking, okay, pull my braking point back a little bit. Yes, I can still use the same amount of force, but I need to come out of it quicker, like considerably quicker, and effectively try to coast more through the corner.
Yeah.
Like some people will think, oh, you need to always be on the brake or on the throttle at all times. No, that's not true. You can quite easily coast through a corner, because not only can it be faster, it can also make the car feel a lot more stable because you haven't got a load of weight moving around all over the place.
Okay.
Like if you're not accelerating or braking, like with either of the pedals, the only thing that's going to be slowing you down is rolling resistance and aerodynamic drag, which isn't going to do a huge amount to the weight shift of the car.
Mhm.
So it will feel quite comfortable when you get in towards the apex, which is where you need it. And then once you get to the apex, you can think, right, when do I hit the throttle? And it's basically, when can I hit the throttle without going off the road or spinning?
Okay. Yeah, so watch out for curbs.
Pretty much. And it's something that will come with time as you learn what the actual limits of the track are, and then you can build it up and up and up.
Okay. And is this like all those things that we've gone through, is this the same whether it be wet or dry?
So
Or
with
just perfect it in the dry first and then we'll talk about the wet?
I was going to say, so let's focus on the dry stuff first. The wet side in F1, to my knowledge, and in ACC, it is pretty much the same. In iRacing, it is completely different.
iRacing's bizarre. Like, normally you'd want to stay on your racing line because that's where all the water comes off. Whereas for some reason on iRacing, like, you go off the racing line and you have so much grip. You go on the racing line and you don't have any.
Yeah, do you know why that's the case?
No.
So, iRacing is actually significantly more realistic with wet weather racing than any of the other sims, which is why it's taken them so long to actually implement it. So, on the racing line, the rubber feels so asphalt is not smooth by default. It's laid down in quite a jagged surface, and as cars drive along it, rubber gets put down, and that rubber fills the gaps in between the between the bits of asphalt, so it becomes a much smoother surface.
Oh, so that's why they say the track's been rubbered in, so to speak.
Yeah, so what it means, it quite literally puts rubber down on the track.
So in rain, it has an adverse effect, so it makes it slippier.
In the rain, it becomes a sheet of water because it's water that's gone straight down onto a smooth surface. So what you end up having is that it kind of acts more like ice rather than something that you expect to be able to punch through and grip onto.
Yeah.
But off the racing line, the tarmac hasn't been filled in by all of that rubber, so it's still a very jagged surface.
Yeah.
And that provides something for the tire to punch through the water. Like if you put something on top of, like if you had a plate and you put water in it, and then you put something flat on top of the water, chances are, no matter how much you push down on it within reason, that object won't go through the water because of water's surface tension. But if you have a jagged surface, the water's got nothing to grip onto for itself, so it can effectively be dispersed a lot easier.
Okay.
That's why like if you watched some clips, actually I've got a great example. If you just bear with me a moment, you might hate me for bringing this up, you might love me for bringing this up, but I don't know. Let me try and find it. Let's have a look. Where's the bit that I actually care about? Oh, it's not that. Ah, here it is. Right. We go back onto this. So, this is probably the best example.
Oh, so is this why Max Verstappen always finds grip?
Not
around
exactly.
The outside.
But so the normal racing line is to hold it tight to the apex of turn 3.
Side, yeah.
So you can see that the Mercedes at the front is off the racing line, but not very far off it. So they're outside of the main rubbered in patch, but they're not a huge amount away
so it's not
from
too
it.
much water where they are.
You've got the second Mercedes that's trying to follow the normal racing line, and then you've got Max off in his own world, all the way out on the outside. But the reason why he's done that is you've effectively got a car's width thick band of where it's been very heavily rubbered in, and then it slowly gets less rubbered in the more you go out, because nobody ends up all the way out on the outside of the corner unless they're having an accident. So what you've got in towards the apex is a very smooth part of track that, despite the car's weight and the downforce and how easily the tyres can break through the water, it can't break through water that's stuck on a
smooth surface.
On the smooth surface, which is effectively how you get aquaplaning, where the tyres can't break through how much water there actually is. So you can kind of imagine it as if you're on the dry racing line in the wet, even with wet tyres, it's kind of like mini aquaplaning. But if you go all the way out to the outside, you will find, even though you're taking a much longer run around a corner, it will be significantly faster because you have not got that smooth surface
for the water to carry more speed,
catch onto. What also helps is that because that asphalt is very jagged, it's something for the tyre to grip onto. Now, it's disastrous for tyre wear in general because you don't want to have sharp edges going into a tyre. But in the wet, because of how the water manifests itself around where the asphalt is. It can kind of fill in those little gaps, so it makes it not quite as sharp, and also the tread blocks move around the jagged edges wherever it can within reason.
Okay.
So that's why you end up seeing Mercedes ahead of Red Bull after one corner. They're already ahead.
So why don't more people do that? Because like classic Brazil, like last week before, people just constantly stay on the racing line, except for Max, who uses the whole track when it's wet.
So Max's background in racing is almost entirely in karting, and this is a technique that you learn from karting.
Right.
And the more wet weather karting you do, and this even applies to if you're karting in the rain on a slick tire.
Just something you get used to.
It is something that you get used to, and it's also why Max has a very different driving style compared to everybody else. For context, Max's first F1 season was his second year in car racing.
Yeah, didn't he do Formula 4 and then straight to F1?
He did F3.
F3,
and then
went
straight
F3 or
in.
F4,
Yeah,
I can't remember.
He did 1 year of F3 and then went straight into F1. His first car racing title was an F1 World Championship, but he had spent vastly more time than anybody else in karting, which is why his driving style is very on the nose, because you drive a kart on the front axle and you just let the rear end waggle around wherever it fancies. But this is something.
Yeah, that's funny because Albon was saying that like the car, the way that the Red Bull's designed is not necessarily around Max, but it's designed on the nose, and as the season goes on and on, Max likes it to get twitchier and twitchier. So
yeah, it's funny that, isn't it?
People then can't control it, whereas he can.
Yeah, that's by design, not by accident. But yeah, this outside line, you'll frequently heard it being referred to as the karting line in the wet, because it is.
Right.
It just is. So when you're racing in the wet in iRacing, when you're coming up towards a corner, you effectively want to be on the inside, like off the generic racing line. Do most of your braking throughout the section before you get to where the traditional racing line is. Skate across the traditional racing line to get onto the outside of it. Do all of your turning there, and then find somewhere that you can get traction from. So instead of almost like U-ing the corner, you have to do a very extreme V of it. It's something that you will have to, like, if you're expecting rain in your in this 24-hour race, you will need to practice it, because it will feel very, very weird.
Okay.
I've only done one race in iRacing in the wet, and that was around Daytona, and it was a very eye-opening experience.
Yeah,
because
I think
you
I've
have
done
to
one
drive it so
Le Mans in the rain, and it's so or the Le Mans circuit in the rain.
For corner, like for each of the corners, you basically have to avoid the standard racing line wherever you can.
Okay.
It's going to take quite some time to get used to it, but
I'd imagine Nuffields in the rain is again a lot wider.
What year was it? It wasn't even wet, but it's going to be such a good example.
Last year for Silverstone, because it absolutely tanked it down most of the time. Or this year, should I say?
Yeah, that was actually. I was thinking of 2019.
The race wasn't wet, but like quali and everything else was really wet.
Let's see. They did end up going on to the
intermediates
end up on
race, wet tyres, didn't they? Or inters?
Yeah, they ended up on intermediates. I just can't remember when it was. I don't know whether it was actually wet. Oh, that's just as they were coming off. I don't know whether it was actually wet enough for them to change their line. Let's have a look. There's probably not enough. No, there isn't enough in that. Okay. Was it 19? I know that this was dry, but I'm sure it was this year. Yeah, it was. So this is sort of accurate for a wet racing line in that. So the Mercedes that's behind is away from the traditional racing line and away from the apex. So that's kind of like the route that you would take. And around Luffield, okay, this isn't a great example, but you'd be all the way up towards the outside.
Yeah, so you'd be further off in the middle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like, if you can get it straightened up and then cut across, basically, almost like you're going into the old pit lane.
Yeah.
You can get a very good drive if you do it right.
Okay.
It's something that, as you're driving, you will learn where to go and where not to go.
Okay.
Is there any? I mean, I don't really want to use 2008 because that was so long ago, and I don't remember a time where. I know. What year was that? What year was I? Was it? Qualifying.
We don't talk about, what was it, 21 or 22? 21 it was.
Nobody talks about 2021. No one does. I'm hoping that there'll be a good example through here. So, like, just in general, F1 cars tend to have enough downforce to. But you see, this little slide that comes here.
Yeah.
That's probably because of putting down more throttle on a slick part of the track.
Okay.
That's not necessarily them being too greedy with the throttle or there being a puddle there. That's just there being water on a slick part of track, and the rear tyre hasn't got enough purchase on the track to actually get through it. I'm hoping, surely there's a good example of doing it. It's the problem with F1 cars; they just have so much. They have so much downforce that they can just stick on a standard.
Wherever they are.
Yeah, basically wherever they want to go, they'll find some kind of grip. Although in some corners they've only got one route. Let's see, is there? There was a. Oh, challenge. Here it is. I can't remember what year it was, but there was a wet race at Zandvoort one year in GT3. That's not wet, although they have got their rain lights on, which is interesting. Yeah, I can't remember when it was.
This year's Porsche Cup at Silverstone was really, really wet, if you wanted a...
That might be a good idea, if I can find it. Silverstone 2024. Yeah, this might help. Practice session, qualifying session, race. Oh goodness. Yeah, that's.
You know what it is?
Yeah, that's pretty wet.
That's they cancelled it so many times.
So, you'll see. The leader isn't where you'd expect them to be. They're kind of like in the middle of the road when braking for the first corner. Well, the first
what corner
real.
Is that? Oh, that's the loop. Yeah.
It's turn 3 on the F1 layout.
Yeah.
And you can see that all of the cars behind them just aren't really travelling the normal racing line.
Yeah.
And that's because it's been so heavily rubbered in, and they don't want to try and brake on a slick surface. So that's why they're all over there. Through here, it's just mechanical grip in general is going to be at a premium, so you just have to deal with it. And then the kink, there's only one.
Because these guys don't have any ABS, do they, in Porsche Cup? Or traction
I don't
control?
know, because different Porsche Cup series have their own regulations as to whether they're allowed traction control or ABS or whatever
I think
else.
these guys don't. I think it's exactly the same car for this whole series.
Okay. But you can see that there isn't really anyone troubling an early apex. Like P2, P3, and P5 are in the middle of the road, and it's because they're trying to avoid a slick section, and they're just trying to find grip anywhere they can. Like they're all drifting out middle of the road and further, just trying to find some kind of grip. Now,
that guy obviously found more because he overtook him.
Yeah, if you look at the front two, so second's in shot, first isn't. So second goes for a tight line, whereas first is all the way out on the exit. Now the tight line means you cover less distance, which is great, so you get close. But the extra traction, being able to get your foot on the throttle earlier, just
helps that guy out in the lead.
Allows you to maintain the lead. I'm not expecting anything unusual through cops because it's basically one line. Maybe they left the apex a bit more breathing space, and through like there are going to be some corners
is always going to be the same.
There are going to be corners where you just can't avoid. You can't avoid staying on the general racing line. Let's see. Yeah, so both of these guys, like the black and gold Porsche, probably isn't solely there as a defensive move, but also because they know that's where they're going to have some kind of grip to get the car slowed down. And once they cross over the traditional racing line, they'll feel the cars try to slide out from underneath them because they've suddenly hit that slick patch, which is why you'll see some of them run off unusually wide.
Yeah.
Bit of gliding and such. But yeah, like driving in the rain, you're just going to have to get used to trying to find grip wherever you can. It's not going to be a one size fits all. You're always gonna you're gonna do one lap, feel that it's pretty comfortable, but you want to take a slightly different line. You take a slightly different line and you find a second. Yeah. And then you do that at each of the other corners, and suddenly you're finding 4, 5, 6 seconds, and it's like, well, where has this all come from? And it's partly you getting used to the conditions, but also partly getting used to where to put the car and where to find the grip.
Yeah.
Like taking a long outside line through a tight and long corner like Luffield. It seems a bit unintuitive because you're so far away from the apex. You lose a bunch of time by taking a longer line and covering more distance. But you can get on the power so much earlier compared to someone who's just sitting on the standard racing line, not least because they're tighter at the corner exit, but also they're stuck on a slick part of the track and something that the tyre doesn't want to grip into.
Yeah.
So it just makes...
So actually coming out off the so-called fastest, route round is actually quicker because you've got way more grip, which means you've got more speed. Makes sense.
It's basically like wet racing lines and dry racing lines differ significantly.
Okay.
Oh, that's a brilliant example that we've just come across. So, got car deep on the inside and we'll hold it tight on the apex. The car that we're on board with is probably a car and a half width away from the racing line.
So will he turn into the apex or will he hold his line?
Well, it's kind of irrelevant on how close they ended up getting to the back of the car ahead of them. Because...
So why did he keep turning in there? Why did he not stay out on the left and try and go around the outside?
Probably because they anticipated the car ahead to wash out to where they would normally go on a dry racing line, but instead they kept it a lot tighter through the apex. Yeah, pretty much. So that's just something you'll have to learn driving with other cars. That's just braking too late.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's weather driving is always a bit of an art rather than a science, but you can do things to make things easier for yourself.
Yeah.
Because if you just hit the brakes on the racing line, you're going to lock up a wheel one way or another, and ABS is like even ACC's ABS system in iRacing rain is not going to save you. You just have to rely on being in the right place of the track.
Yeah.
and go from there.
Okay. I'll practice with both. I'll practice in the dry for technique first, and then once I've managed to get the right technique with the trail braking, then I'll practice in the wet, because we've got, well, all it says is how to look it's just real weather, so real-time weather. So
okay, so it's
24 hours in Britain in November, December, it's going to be, I doubt it's going to be dry, but you never know.
I'd be surprised if it is dry at any point. Well, actually at any point I'd be surprised if it's dry.
No, my luck, it'll rain when I'm driving, so...
Yeah, but it's more important to get the technique down, because you can then translate that over to not only the different weather conditions, but also the different games as well.
Yeah.
So I think the focus for you should really be learning and understanding how to get into the habit of trail braking.
Yeah.
And using the Track Titan software to tell you where you're going wrong, specifically like what part of the track you should actually be in, rather than necessarily the speed you're carrying through a corner, because that will come with time and experience.
Okay. So what I'll probably do is maybe not drive slower, but just not fully send it every time, and like practice the driving technique, and then sort of see if I can then speed it up, and then see where I'm sitting for lap times. Because I mean, I think the average for our cut will be probably like 201, 202, 203, somewhere around there.
Mm-hmm. So if you can do that consistently, you're in good stead.
2 seconds. Holly, get out. Sorry, my dog's burrowing her way into the back of my computer. And then I'm hoping to... I want to be able to get below the 2 minute. If I can do like a 1:59, I'll be really happy.
Yep.
That's sort of the aim for this race. And then, see where I get to. I don't know what's a really impressive time. Probably like a 1:56, maybe.
Yeah, I can't remember. Like I've only done a couple of races around Silverstone in a GT3, but that was in the fixed setup stuff. I very much prefer the fixed setup races, because it's just one less thing to worry about, and I just deal with whatever I've got at the time.
Yeah.
Let's see, can I find it?
I think, to be fair, we tend to use, if we're going to use setups, we tend to use on Track Titan, there's like esports setups and things like that, so we tend to use those ones if we are going to use setups.
It doesn't show you beyond the last 30 days. Okay, but that's kind of...
And would you put a race setup on when you're practicing, rather than like a quali?
Yes. Yeah. Yes, I would. Because you can spend a lot more time circling around on a race setup, mainly because it's got more fuel in it.
Yeah.
But also that setup is designed to
behave the way you're going to be driving it, I suppose, as well.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's better to understand all of the bits and pieces about how to drive a car around a circuit as fast as you can on a race setup, partly because you spend more time in the race, and that's where you get the points and such from. Yeah. But for qualifying, it's basically exactly the same, apart from more on the nose in general.
Okay.
So for the race that I did last night, I did about 2.5 hours worth of race fuel load running to make sure I felt comfortable and knew how to drive it right and such, and where to put the car and whatever else. I think I did 3 practice qualifying runs in total.
Okay.
Because I would just spend more time working on how best to get the car around the track during the race, and just accept that it will be more edgy during qualifying.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So this week I'll go away and I'll practice the trail braking and technique, and then when I think I've cracked it, I'll let you know, and then if you don't mind having a relook at the Track Titan, and then maybe just sort of critiquing where I'm sort of maybe losing time still.
Yep, that's
That'd
fine.
be grand. Thank you. That's been
That's
really
all right.
helpful. Like I've learned like so much in the last like hour and a bit just from obviously like what you said and how you've explained it, because like I mean I've been through so many YouTube videos but everyone kind of like does it a bit differently, and then no one's kind of been able to sort of like be like, this is what you need to do. So,
Yeah, it can be really, like, it all just comes down to who it is that's saying it and how they explain it and what works for you and such.
yeah, I think as well as it's like questions as well when you watch something and you think, oh, so how do I do this, this and this? Obviously you can't ask the question, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, that's kind of why sort of why I'm here, and at least why I said that you can just come to me with any questions that you've got and such, and kind of take it from there.
Cool. Thank you.
That's all right. So yeah, try and get as much practice in as you can, and just
well, I'm
kinda go
around
from
this
there,
week,
really.
so hopefully this week I can spend most of the week on the sim, and then I think I'm working Saturday maybe, but I think that's it. So
what am I doing? I'm working on Thursday. Yeah, that's fine.
nice. Where are you Thursday? Williams?
Yeah, I'm there. I'm there pretty much all day.
Are you?
Doing STEM in the morning and then an internal evening.
Oh, I think I might be. Oh no, that's next week. I'm doing that. I've got something like that, but I think it's the 28th.
Yeah, the internal evenings are pretty chill. It's sort of like another STEM session.
Yeah.
Yes, it's pretty good. I had that on Friday. Yeah, Friday, and it was fine.
That's right then. It wasn't too long.
No, it's like, so what is it? You got the normal STEM stuff of whenever it is until like 1:30, 1:45, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And then you got a couple of hours to wait until the internal stuff starts at 4:00, and that runs for 2 hours.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not too bad.
Cool. All right then.
Right.
I'll speak to you at some point, but thank you very much.
Yeah, good luck.
All right. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.